and running. What's up? Hey, welcome back everyone to another episode here on the Matt LaStalia Show. I hope that I was able to get everything worked out and get you guys a nice little musical intro back to the way things used to be. I'm still working out. Things have just been a chaotic freaking whirlwind over here between getting a second dog. We now have a second Newfoundland, Harper, sweet little girl, super awesome. Definitely not the point of today's conversation, but absolutely worth mentioning. She is about 9 pounds and is adorable. She's brown and white, and she's just a great little pup. But they are. And it's not even her, ironically. The dogs are stealing my sleep, trying to prep me for another bout in fatherhood. But yeah, I digress. So it's today, what I really wanted to talk about was this idea of the concepts of manipulation and of influence, right? So nowadays we are hearing quite a lot about influence. We hear about, these YouTube influencers and, just all of these different, like influence has become like it's a whole new buzzword in and of itself. And it's kind of like personal brand and all of this kind of crap. Like, all right, cool. A lot of influence. So I remember growing up and thinking about influence, like anytime that influence was ever really mentioned overtly in my life was from my parents talking about friends who were bad influences, right? Like, and to their perfect credit, they were right about a lot of the people. I had some not great, I guess, I don't know, it depends on what you consider great. But I had some interesting people in my life that I chose to have around me. And cigarette smoking, alcohol drinking, like early on, and just lots of fun, interesting times with fun, interesting people. But I totally get their perspective on the influence aspect, and it's interesting looking back and thinking about this, how I've thought this concept through and placing this on those early relationships with people. It's very interesting to tease out the differences in how I understand influence and manipulation now, and being able to kind of put in perspective those things that happened before and be able to understand when there was manipulation and when there was influence and why any of this really matters. And I think really if we want to start off with why, right, which is where we should always start. We should always start with why, because here, for those of you who have not listened before, the reason that I'm here and the reason that I enjoy this, coming and doing this podcast and creating resilience and mindset-based trainings is because I really enjoy, I find pure passion in the pursuit of helping people to overcome their personal obstacles, especially when I'm working with people. Like the people that I work with the best and are those who have clearly identified that the thing standing in their way is actually the thing that's in between, these two ears on either side of their head, right? It's in their mind. Like the biggest obstacle and the biggest recurring obstacle and the most significant obstacle creating device is within each one of us. We create our own limitations. We structure our narratives about our lives in particular ways, and sometimes those narratives are good and sometimes they're not so good. And when I take a lot of pleasure in working with people who have those structures that are built that are not so good, I really enjoy breaking down those structures and helping assist people along the way to getting to a place that is that they're out of their way, right? And they can push forward in pursuing their passions, right? I like to think of myself, in the sense of I'm not the person that's going to go dig in the Rockies with you for the gold, right? Like you're going out on your life's mission to go dig up some gold in the Rockies and like the 49ers, the whole gold rush. I don't want to be the one digging out there with you. I want to be the one that like helps you. I want to be the one like driving the truck, or like giving you the gas or the common like early marketing. One of the first marketing strategies or the first sales strategies or business strategies that I heard that really clicked with me is I want to be the person who sells the shovels and pickaxes. I don't want to be the person digging the gold. And so like you're the person who's there and is providing people with the means to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish, right? And I love that. I love the idea of enabling people when it's for their own perceived good, right? And I say perceived just because, like I'm not here to judge what you think is good or not. I want to enable you. I want to enable you to get out of your own way so that you can pursue whatever it is that you want to do, right? Once you get out of your way, once you understand how to knock down these artificial barriers that you're putting up in your own way, then you choose how you want to live your life. But it's very difficult to choose how you want to live your life and to passionately pursue, anything when you don't understand how you don't understand which obstacles are really obstacles and which obstacles are not, And this is why I've always found a great deal of passion or not passion, but interest in Stoicism, because it's this basic idea of, let's focus on the things that we can control, which are very little and mostly stick inside. But just because they're inside of us doesn't mean that we can control them. But all of the things that we can control are inside of us, right? Inside of our thoughts. We can't control whether or not we get cancer. We can't control whether or not we get a terrible disease, But, we can control the way that we respond to those things, There's very brilliant studies that have been done that show the difference between people that in their mindset when they get a cancer diagnosis. Like, I got to look it back up, man. I didn't even think about it like going into the show. I didn't intend on having this intro tangent that I'm doing right now, but I think it's really important for us to continue to go back to my why here, because that's what I'm encouraging you guys to do, is to continue to go back to your why. And the why is so important, like that, it can create that energy. It allows us to acknowledge the fact that as humans, like this is a core tenet of this show, right? If you've listened to me at any length of time, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to continue to say it because it is one of the most true things in our existence, and you need to know it. And so for the people that are new, this is good for you. For the people that are here, that have been here the whole time, this is also really good for you, because this needs to be commonplace. Once we understand this and we can actually take actions and make decisions acknowledging this reality, then it can really change your life. And it's that we are emotional beings. We make decisions emotionally. This is tried and true. And it is even the case with, I brought it up, I believe it was probably last week, talking about the guy. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember his name. Good grief. My freaking life, man. I tell you what, I can't. I need more sleep. I am not on the cutting edge. But Phineas Gage. Ha! There's a guy, Phineas Gage, who had a railroad tie, shot through his head or something like that, and basically shut off the emotional part of his brain's functioning. And he was, long story short, he was unable to make decisions from that point on. He spent so much time, and they found people with, diseases or complications with that area of the brain, and where they aren't able to simply like make the decision of what pair of shoes to wear, or what shirt to wear. They can't even get out of the house because there's too many decisions, and they don't have an emotional tether to have them decide like, oh, well, I think that these look really cool and I think that people will like them. Like, well, that's not really in the rational, logical mind where we like to think that we live. That's not reason enough. They're like, well, what's the weather going to be like? And if the weather's going to be like this, well, then that shoe's not really going to be good. We need better traction. Oh, but I'm going to go to this place and it's going to be nice and that's not really dressy. Okay, I need to make sure that I find a shoe that's got good traction, but it's also kind of dressy. And you go through this whole freaking 4D chess about your shoes, and then, you know, by the time that you get done, you realize that one of the shoelaces is broken, and then you got to start the process all over again. You know, something silly like that. So they can't even get out of their house. All of that to say that our emotions are what allow us to thrive, allow us to live, allow us to thrive. Yes, and then they can also terribly bring us down when we don't understand ourselves in relation to our emotions and how to kind of climb out of the holes that we can dig for ourselves emotionally, right? And these are more of those obstacles that I really enjoy helping people through. And it's why I like doing the show. I like doing this free stuff and providing free content because, you know, like, I really truly just want to help people. Like, I love the fact that, you know, I know this stuff. I've gone through like professional training and resilience. I've done so much more of my own research and working with people and discovering and learning. And I love the ability to share that with you guys. Now, I could do a better job of this when it's dedicated and focused and we can spend quality time together, like in a group setting or a one-on-one. But this generalized free stuff is like, and the show, this podcast is great. I love it. I love doing it. And so that's kind of my why. You know, I get pleasure and I derive energy from helping people to overcome that stuff. Now to the why of the actual episode today, right? So influence versus manipulation. Why are we talking about that? Why does that matter? Well, I think that it's important to acknowledge the power of language, right? And so words mean things literally, right? No duh, right? You look up a word. Like today, I have a couple of Merriam-Webster dictionary, and I tried to use the same dictionary, right? Because some of them were like Oxford, and some of them were Merriam-Webster. I was like, no, I'm going to go with the same dictionary to pull these hard line, you know, clinical definitions of these things. And so I wanted to do that, but it's also important for us to realize that just because we have like technical definitions of these things doesn't mean necessarily that that's the best definition. Our dictionaries are not permanent. They're very finite. They get changed, right? They go in and they revamp and they add words that aren't words, you know, but now they are words because they're in the dictionary. And they change definitions of other words. And this happens. So there's like a dictionary review group of people that go in and review words and like change definitions or alter or amend definitions so that they match the current understanding. Like I believe it was relatively recently that literally the definition of literally got changed to not mean necessarily literally. It can mean figuratively because people use literally so much incorrectly that it could just be like basically an exaggerated term for something that may not be literal. You know, basically just it doesn't necessarily mean literally. Like by definition, it doesn't mean that anymore. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff. So anyway, I think that it was really important to understand this because we have this really negative connotation of manipulation, and when we think about these things and we think about these things happening, I think it's really important for us to understand what it means to influence, what it means to be influenced, what it means to manipulate, and what it means to be manipulated. Because it's not exactly what you think, you know, and it's important to ascribe proper categorizations to these things so that we can kind of know when they're happening and that we don't necessarily have to put up unnecessary guards or barriers to things that are happening, and we can kind of let them in, or we recognize it as it's happening and we can put up the appropriate borders or protections or safeguards, you know. But without knowing these things and with being kind of a sail, you know, flailing out there in the wind, getting blown in whatever direction the wind is blowing, you know, it's a little bit more difficult to do this. And so a lot of this I learned by going through like sales training and stuff like that. And so there's some interesting kind of back and forths when it comes to that and the ideas there. I actually remember I was talking to a really good friend of mine who is a formidable sales professional, you know, multiple time business owner, CEO, freaking owns his own or is like the head or lead trainer of a sales training organization and just a phenomenal person. And I remember we were talking about influence. It's like, wouldn't you rather like be influenced than, I don't know if it was manipulation. I think it was like persuaded or something. Would you rather be persuaded or influenced? And I was like, neither. Like, I would rather neither of those things occur. And he was like, really? Why not? You know, like, why? Most people say that they would much rather be influenced. You know, you think about people that influenced you. You think about like Martin Luther King Jr. and you think about, you know, like Michael Jordan, or, you know, like these big time cultural figures that were really influential, that motivated people to pick up a basketball or motivated people to join a movement, you know, and really change their lives. These are great things. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, there's bad influences though, you know, like I don't like the idea. For me, it wasn't even that there were bad influences. Like truly, it was more like, I don't like the idea of somebody changing the way that I think, you know, and having my behavior altered because of that. Like, I don't desire that outright, you know, and like passively without being aware of it. I like seeking out mentors, and I like finding people based on the things that I want to do. I like finding people that will help direct me to where I want to go, which is actually the point of today's conversation, is that finding a mentor, finding somebody who will actively mentor you and will steer you in the right direction, is finding a personalized manipulator. It is not finding a personalized influencer, not finding a generalized influencer. You know, it's following somebody, it's working with somebody who is going to manipulate you, right? They're going to actively and intentionally try to change what you're doing, try to change your behaviors, try to change your actions, try to change your thoughts so that you can produce a different outcome. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You know, and you think about influence, and you're like, oh, well, all this positive connotation around influence. I remember when I was a kid, the only time I ever heard, like I said, the only time I ever heard influence was about the friends that I had. Like, oh, those are bad influences. You don't need to hang around them. Yeah, like I said, to my parents, do credit. But I didn't turn out too awful. I'm still here. You know, I haven't kicked the can yet. But I do wanted to knuckle down into some of the definitions, like I said, and I wanted to start with influence because it's such a buzzword, and with that's going on, and there's a lot of kind of positive connotations around influence, around, you know, especially around this community. And if you're here listening to me, you're very much aware of YouTube influencers and all of that jazz. And so influence, according to good old Merriam-Webster, refers to the power to change or affect someone or something. The power to cause changes without directly forcing them to happen. A person or thing that affects someone or something in an important way. So the key words that I kind of extracted from here were power, change, and without direct force. Right? Those are the things that really stuck out to me, you know, and I think about that in relation to the people that my parents were concerned about me being around, you know, as a kid, and then also, you know, to this day throughout my whole life. And I really thought about the fact that, you know, at the end of it, we're all influencers, right? Like, our mere existence influences. You know, by our presence being somewhere, we're influencing that in a particular way with our being. You know, and as we come more and more into, you know, quote unquote, into our own, like we figure out our principles and we find our moorings to things that we will not leave from. You know, if you believe that hard work is required to be successful, and that's a principled mooring that you have that you're not going to leave, you know, that is going to impact the way that you view, the way that you interact with people, the way that you judge people, the way that you know, you lead, the way that you are led, the way that you work. And all of those actions that you take are going to be passively, at a very minimum, going to be passively observed and absorbed by everyone that is around you. You know, and so it's interesting because I think about influence like in a way that sometimes it has a weird opposite effect. You know, like some people like to push the limits. they like to push the boundaries. They like to make people feel uncomfortable. You think about like comedians, you know, they know that they're beating down the right path when people start getting uncomfortable, and you know, you're getting that look from some people, and especially like if you're not performing, if you're just around a group of people, some people just have that innate drive to push limits. And so when they see people getting squeamish or like start to object, they're like, yes, and they want to push forward and harder. And so your influence, while for somebody that isn't of that mindset, if you're getting squeamish, someone be like, oh, hey, I acknowledge the fact that like you're uncomfortable right now. So like, what do we need to do to address this? Like, let's make sure that you're cool or whatever. And some people, it's the opposite, right? This is actually the reason why like reverse psychology works. It's, you know, it's the same kind of concept, but that's acting a certain way on purpose. That is actually, reverse psychology actually starts diving into manipulation, right? Because that you are actively seeking to change behavior by your actions. Now, if I'm just like, if you're doing something like, oh, I'm not necessarily trying to get you to change your behavior. Like if you're eating something, like, oh, I'm not trying to make you stop. But my reaction might be like, oh, is that nasty? Like I was about to eat this squid leg or this tentacle, and that's not good. That's not good. You're like, oh, that's it's an influence. You know, it brings up awareness, and we're all aware of these things that are going on. Some more than others, and some not very much at all. but we all have these cues, these things that we pick up on socially, these social cues that help us to know when we're treading in kind of chartered territory and when we're veering away from that chartered territory. And I think that, you know, identifying it and acknowledging that all of us in our current standing, no matter where you're at in your personal journey, and like I said, and coming into your own, we all influence, you know, whether it be the way that you don't necessarily interact with people or the way that you do actively interact with people. And, you know, even those who are the most stubborn and hard-headed, who are like, oh, I'm not influenceable, you know, I have firm standings and firm beliefs. Like, even if that's true, and you were like, I know who I am, I go to work and I do what I do. Like, the fact that you're going into work and you're around other human beings means you're being influenced, whether you want to be or not. You could, the outcome, like, if you were going to create this presentation and you had this vision in your mind, and at the end of it, you created that exact vision, you were still influenced along the way, because you had to take maneuvers around other people, like, oh, what do you think about this? Like, I want to add that. And, you know, it's very unlikely that if you're working in a group that a presentation is going to turn out exactly the way that you envisioned it, for one. Even if it does, the maneuvering and positioning that you have to do in order to get there is all influence, right? You're still being influenced, and maybe it didn't change the outcome of this particular product, in this particular presentation, but these are things that are going to go in your mind, and you're going to bounce like, oh, well, I got feedback on this when you go into the next thing. And if you get feedback on it again, that's not like getting feedback on it the first time. You get the same feedback twice in a row, like, oh, you know what? That color scheme doesn't really work. You got to do this and that. Like, no, it's fine. This is the way I want it. Cool. Got it. And you get the same critique, the same idea again later. You're like, oh man, that's the second time I heard it. Like, there's power there, right? These are seeds that are being planted. And that's the thing with influence. It's much more of a long play, especially when we think about like positive influences. I think about, like being at an office, and I go back to this a lot because I worked in the Army in an office for, you know, like 11 years. So it's a go-to. And I know that there's a lot of people that, you know, go to work in offices. And even if you're not physically in an office anymore and you're working at home from a computer, it's still the office-ish vibe, right? Where you're working with other people in that type of not outdoorsy experience. I think about being around people who, you know, like somebody that's coming in and is making really, really good personal health choices. Like somebody that's coming in, they're bringing their own food, right? And it's all healthy. Like there's no rice, there's no like crazy carbs, not smothered in gravy, you know, whatever. It's like really healthy, just like meat and veggies. And they're adamant about it. They're like, yeah, no, it's cool. Like, I'll eat before and I'll still go out to lunch with you guys, but I'm not gonna eat. I'm like, I eat this, you know. And actually I can't go out to lunch with you guys because, you know, I eat a little bit early while I'm working, and then I use my lunchtime to go work out. And like, you see this person, and that person that's planting that seed, you're seeing that every day. And some people are going to, you know, be more inclined to see that as like as a possible route for them to go down. You know, it might be desirable, like, oh man, you know, like I've always wanted to do that. I just never really found a way. Like maybe I could talk to them and figure out kind of what they do, how it is that they prep. Do they meal prep? Where do they get the recipes? Like where do they go to the gym? And you start asking, you know, and you'll see, you start to ask like a question like, hey, where do you go to the gym? Like, oh, you go there? Okay, that's cool. You know, that's you watering that seed just a little bit. Just a little bit of water. You know, just, I'm not curious. I'm not trying to get into a whole conversation about it. I'm going to work my way in. Other people want to dive in. Like, oh, dude, I've always wanted to start eating healthy and right. Like, how do you do? Give me your recipes. Like, I want in. How do we do this? You know, other people are just like, whatever. I'm getting that Burger King, son. Give me that McDonald's. I want all the fatty fries. And, you know, it is what it is. But there's influence there. That is the slow progress of influence where that seed is planted and it's watered and develops over time. And then, you know, I think about the fact that, you know, that we all influence, right? And that our presence alone, the fact that we exist around one another, the fact that once you leave home and you're around other people, that like things change, influence immediately occurs. And this was evidenced no better than like I was like writing out basically like an article version of this yesterday, and when I was doing it, I looked over and I saw the two pups that I saw Harper and Moose. And when I saw them, they were like, Moose is laying on the ground and there's an ottoman that's really low, and Harper, being much smaller, is like underneath the ottoman, and they're just barking. Moose is like lays over and is like on his back with his head turned, and he's like barking at her and she's barking back, and then just kind of laying there messing around. And I'm like, this is freaking adorable. So I grab my camera and I go to record it. And so I go and like lay down on the ground and I'm recording, and I get about 5-7 seconds of recording before Moose identifies the fact that he's being watched. You know, like my interaction changed from being on my computer in kind of the next room over to my eyes looking at them. And so he gets up and walks straight over and like starts like licking the phone. Like, yeah, man. And you can even hear me like on that video, I say, oh, the observer effect, you know, and then Moose comes over and we play around. And it was a good time. But it was very fitting. It was very perfect. And so I did want to dive a little bit into the observer effect real quick, just for those who are not terribly familiar with it or have no idea what it is. So there was an experiment that was done, and it's one of the most famous basic kind of physics. I guess it's not necessarily that basic, but it's basic because I understand it, and I can't understand complex physics, so it's got to be some sort of basic. And anybody that knows physics and hears me explain this, you're like, you didn't even get that right. So, you know, it is what it is. Roll with me, though. So, the observer effect was identified in a now very famous physics experiment where they took atoms and they have like an atom gun, right? And they shoot, and now I'm sure this doesn't look like the gun that I'm thinking, but I don't care. In my head, I'm seeing like a rifle that's like busting out, and it's like bop 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 bop, freaking atom. It's so, judge me, bro. But anyway, so they shoot at these atoms, and they go and they implant, because atoms are like little pieces of matter. So it's not like light, right? It's not like these lights where it's coming out and light's actually coming in a wave. And so it's an individual, whoop, just like a bullet, just pop, and it just sticks onto what the end, you know, backstop that will it goes to the wall, right? Bop, sticks on the wall. And so what they did is they took a barrier and they put it between the gun and the wall, and then they cut a slit in it, and then they shot it through the slit. And like you would think, you know, and when they're shooting, it's like a flow. It's like rapid fire, like machine gun, like just freaking atoms firing through. And you can see that like on the wall, basically a mirror image of the slit is there with some slight deviations around it. You know, it's just like where the atoms are probably bouncing off the edges of the slit or whatever, but it's all concentrated in a line that mirrors the slit. And so they did. They actually show it when they break it down. There was a video. Oh gosh, I mean, you can look it up. Look up the double slot It might be slot or slit. I don't know. Double slot experiment on YouTube, and you'll find it. There's a million of them. Don't watch the cartoon. I mean, you can watch the cartoon one. It's fine. That's good too. The video, the whole movie where that cartoon one comes from is a bunch of BS and nonsense from like a cult leader. So that's why I want you to veer away from the cartoon one. Although they do explain this experiment very well. I think they try to tie it in a way that we can't tie it into other things yet, just because we don't understand it. Anyway, I digress. So back to it. So what they did is before going into this, they always show you kind of the difference in how the light works, right? So how light going through the slit would work. So if a light is here and it's going through that wall barrier with a slit, it's going to be the same thing. That slit is now almost like the source of the light for that, what we'll call the secondary area. The secondary area being the area between the barrier and the wall, right? Where the slit is. Like the slit is in the barrier, and then the gap, and then the wall. So that'll be the secondary area. And then the primary area will be the area between the atom shooting gun and that barrier with the slit. Okay, so in the secondary area, when light's coming through, basically that slit is like the new source of light. So it's coming out from there, and it goes out just like it would from a normal light, like blah, fucking waves. And then when you do two slits, you do a double slit, one on top, one on bottom, like horizontally. Then the light is coming through. While you only have one light source, the light coming through, it goes through both of these slits into that secondary area. And when it enters that secondary area, those wavelengths actually interact with each other, actually connect with one another or impact with one another. And that impacts the way that they flow out to the wall. And you see like all of these different slits that are being represented on the wall that are of different lengths or different like thicknesses and densities. And it's showing you kind of how that works. There's another great video that kind of shows how that works, and it's like by the ripples. So if you drop like two stones in the water and you watch how the ripples impact each other, it's kind of like that, where like they start bumping into each other, and it makes it so it's not one clean wave that's going out. So that's the way that a waveform works, right? But atoms aren't waves. Atoms aren't light. They're matter. They're particles. So it pop, and it just sticks pinpoint right on the wall. And when you have the slit, boom, right through the slit, bam, on the wall, matches the slit. Then, when they do the second slit, they shoot it again, and instead of it going and hitting the one slit and making the one slit marker, or even going through both slits and making two slit marks, it creates the pattern on the back wall like a wave does. So it's got all of these different, all these different lines all the way up and down the wall where the atoms are impacting, just like a light wave, but it's not a light wave. And so that really confused the scientists. They're like, okay, well, let's slow it down. Let's shoot this one at a time and see what happens. Same exact thing. Just very slow. Bop, 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 all the way up and down this wall, creating all these different slits of different densities and different thicknesses. And so they were like triply confused. Like, okay, so we slowed it down, and it's still not making sense. So let's bring in a tool to actually observe what's going on at that barrier, right? And so we're going to put the tool at one of the slits, and we're going to watch what happens. And so every time that atom goes through the slit, it's going to register as a ding, got it. And so they're going and they're doing individual bop, 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 and it's getting 50% of them are going through, and it's like registers 50%, and the other 50% are going through the top slit. And it looks exactly like you would have anticipated in the first place, where it mirrors that slit shape on the wall, just the two, not the wave, not the tons of different slits of different densities and different thicknesses, just those two. So it completely changed the way that it acted when it was being observed. And so the scientists were like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's turn it off. Let's leave it there, and let's turn it off. Just turn the mechanism that's recording the data, or that's analyzing, that's the capturing this data and letting us know that a particle is going, that an atom is going through the slit. Leave the camera there. Let's call it a camera. I don't even know if it was probably a sensor. Let's leave the sensor there, but let's turn it off. So they left it there, and they turned it off. and they shot the atoms back through, and it turned back to a waveform. So it wasn't even like the physical presence that changed the way the atoms were moving, right? It was the act, the actual act of observation that changed it. Neil deGrasse Tyson had a really good analogy for how this works. And it was like, okay, imagine you have a penny sitting in the gap of your car seat, and you reach down to go grab it. And when you're reaching down to grab it, this is like us observing. We're changing the environment by our observation. This isn't perfect because you're actually manipulating it, but obviously that's got to be, this observation has to be manipulating the reality in some way that we just don't understand yet. And so, but he says, like basically as you go into like the penny gets further and further away as you try to reach it, and it opens up the gap, and then it's difficult. So the act of trying to get it actually makes it harder to get. so the more that we look for it, the harder it is to find. It's like it hides itself. But that's what we would try to do, because we try to assign consciousness to these things, because that's how we understand the world, because that's us. So we always, it's the same reason, I forget what the word is, but the same reason that we find smiley faces or faces on things where they don't exist. The same reason that we assign like personality traits to animals is because we see the world through ourselves and as ourselves. And so we have it reflected back at us. And so we try to assign like consciousness and stuff to what's going on. And that I mean, shoot, it might be the case, but we don't know. From my understanding right now in the science, we still don't have a clear understanding of what's going on there. But that is, long story long, the observer effect. So, that is like influence. Basic influence 101 is understanding kind of the observer effect, the fact that you're there observing alone. That alone influences the environment, and it happens and is so consistent that it happens on the atomic level and all the way up to watching puppies, right? Because that's what happened with Moose and Harper. So yeah, that's right. I just tied in physics and my puppies. Watch how many episodes in a row I could tie my puppies into this, because it'll be like all of them. Anyway, and like I said, it doesn't, you could try to play this off like, oh, I'm not influenced, but we're all influenced, man. It's the nature of being. So what I think that we're afraid of admitting or afraid of participating in or talking about is manipulation, right? Because when we think about manipulation, like, what do you think of? You think about manipulation, you think about people trying to take advantage of you, people that, not good things, it's negative, right? And so it's interesting because I remember hearing manipulation. I think about manipulation, and I have for a long, long time, the same way that I think about the word retarded, right? I used the word retarded in the colloquial, yeah, words. I use the word in the layman's way, where like talking about people that are acting stupid or acting a fool or whatever. As a kid, all the time, it was very standard conversational stuff, the way that we talk to each other. But I remember learning in science that it just means to slow down. And so when people are like, "Oh, you're mentally retarded," like that was like a medical term that was used to just say like they're not as their brain isn't processing, it isn't developing at the same rate as as expected, as what we know to be normal for humans. So they're retarded. It's slowed down. If you're going to retard something, you're going to slow it down. And it's the same thing with manipulation. I remember like when I think about manipulation, one of the first things when I used to think about a lot as the immediate counter to the standard understanding of it is that, like, I think of like clay. I think about people manipulating clay into molds and creating what they want out of it by manipulating the clay. And so I've never been stuck so much in the sand about manipulation having to be a bad thing, but I understand that when we talk about people-to-people manipulation, we always see that, like, can you think of a single time that you think of somebody talking about manipulation between people where it was referenced in a positive manner? Like, ever. Because I can't think of that. Outside of conversations that I've had with people, like, about the conversation that I'm having right now, about manipulation itself, but just like, oh man, yeah, like, I want to be a king manipulator. Like you're like, oh no, I want to be an influencer. All right, cool, man. So you want to passively impact the lives of other people. And that's really what I see this is coming down to as like the big difference is it's passive change versus active change. It's like my intent is to change the world, is to change your world, is to change your decisions. Or my intent is not really to care, right? It's like, I'm going to do my thing. And if you want to follow along, like whatever, that's cool. Like join me if you want to. So anybody that's out there that's on YouTube, that's a YouTube influencer, and their goal is to create a larger audience and to have people listen to what they say and to be impacted by the things that they say, they are YouTube manipulators. Let's be clear about the words that we're using. They are trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to manipulate you. Like, I am a manipulator. I'm trying to manipulate you to understand yourself and understand the way that our minds work better so that you can better pursue your life's vision, to make your vision become a reality so that you get out of your way. I want to manipulate the ever-living life out of you in that manner. And I will be clear as day about it. That is my goal. I don't want to influence you. I'm not being passive about this at all. I come to the show very specifically on purpose to manipulate you. That's my goal. You're welcome. What can I say except you're welcome? Yeah, man, Moana's the business. And if you don't know that was Moana, then you suck. So, drive on. Anyway, manipulation, the definition from Merriam-Webster, to treat or operate with the hands or by mechanical means, especially in a skillful manner. That is the #1 definition in Merriam-Webster dictionary. #1. The first one. Nothing negative. Actually, very positive. Skillful. Right? Like, you can't just accidentally fall into manipulation, right? Like, it's not saying that you tried and it was okay. You know? It's the second definition. The second one. To manage or utilize skillfully. Oh, that's two. 2 in a row. No negative connotations. Where are you guys at? #3. This is probably where you'd rather like stray to immediately, like I said. This is actually 2B, right? The third definition. To control or play upon by artful. Even that is like not necessarily bad. Artful, now this is where it gets bad. Unfair or insidious. Insidious means especially to one's own advantage, right? And so, like, yeah, man, that's not good stuff necessarily. I mean, the thing is, if you use the words unfair or insidious, yeah, then that's bad stuff. And so manipulation can be bad because it can be that. Now, manipulation can also be to control or play upon by artful. Artful means especially to one's own advantage. Now, imagine an advertisements, right? I'm just gonna dig right into this. Imagine like seeing an advertisement for weight loss or for fitness, and somebody is saying, "Oh, hey, you should, like, if you want to look good on the beach and you want to turn heads and get everyone's attention, like, come work out with me." And they're all ripped and good looking and tanned, and you're like, man, that's a good looking dude or a good looking chick. They must know what they're doing to get in shape, and that's already playing on your emotions, right? And they're creating a vision for you of you being on the beach, walking down and getting people to turn their heads. That's driving into your emotions. And if you remember, one of the key tenets of the show that I always go back to is that we are emotional beings who justify everything that we do logically, post hoc, right? This is the reason they use those before and after pictures. They want to show you, yeah, you look like crap now. Look at this fat, pale guy. Now he's tanned and ripped, and like, because of our program. And it works, and it works through the manipulation of your emotions. And so, but think about this. Think about if you are gotten yourself out of shape and you're not feeling great, and someone and they run this ad and you get impacted by it and you end up buying the product or service, like, was that a bad thing? Was that manipulation? Did it harm you? The only way that it could harm you is if you invested the money into it and then you didn't do the program, or I guess, I mean, if the program was awful and even if you followed it to a T, it had no results for you. All right, fair enough. You know, most likely any sort of fitness plan, like they're going to have the same generalized themes where it's like eat better, work out. That I'm like, I don't want to break this down into be too simple, but that's how you get in shape. Eat better, work out. Now you could choose different strategies and different ways to eat better, but we all know, man, stop eating chips, stop drinking beer, stop having chocolate, you know, like eat meat and veggies and fruit. Work out. Go for a run. You got this. So that's like we could talk about where desires come from, right? Like, and you think about going back and like why, and I want to take a step back. You know, I want to look like where does that come from? Like the desire, like they're tying into those emotions, right? And they're manipulating our emotions, but our emotions to do those things come from a place, and those come from places like early on, like with our parents. And our parents play this really interesting role. Play this kind of like a influencer / manipulator / dictator / potential friend, right? It's very, very interesting because we're around them all the time and we're in their charge, right? So like what they say goes. They say do this, you got to do it, right? That's manipulation. Like they tell you the world runs like this, like that's your understanding until you find other evidence outside of that. But that's the alpha and omega of your life, right? But then you get influenced by them by the fact that like you see the way that they interact with other people, you see the way they interact with each other, the way they interact with your siblings. This teaches you about relationships. This teaches you about love and responsibility. Passively, this is planting those seeds. This is the argument again back to like what's more effective? Is manipulation or influence more effective? Well, long-term, long-lasting impact, I would argue influence is more effective because you're not. There's a difference when I'm like, hey man, you should really get in shape versus like I'm going and getting in shape and you're like, dude, that's like, I see the results, I see what you're doing and I like it. Like it's the idea, I remember hearing this about religion. You know, you think about somebody going to your house and trying to convince you that Jesus is the way versus like working with somebody who's always on time and is always looking out for other people and you know, is like, and when you reference like, oh yeah, man, I know Jim would give you the shirt off his back. Like, you know what? I wonder what's Jim like? What's Jim about in his personal life? And you find out like, oh my gosh, he's like an avid, you know, Protestant or whatever, or freaking, he's Jewish or Muslim. Like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like, that's what drives you. Like, yeah, man, that's what drives me. You want to learn about, like, you want to come and hang out? Like, we can talk about it if you want to, but it's just, that's what I do. And then that's the influence. That's like, oh man, I'm watching it happen and I see these positive results, these amazing things. I'm like, holy crap, that's really cool. You know, that's that slow seed planting and the watering and then the nurturing and the fertilizing and it growing over time versus manipulation where it's like kind of force feeding. Like, hey man, like this is really bad. See how you're all jacked up? Like you could be better, you know, if you did it like this, but you're all jacked up right now. But let me show you the life, what it looked like if you were better. And so neither of those are bad, right? They both have good intentions and potentially good outcomes. One just has the ability for longer lasting impact. You know, I'm going to give you guys, this is going to be like the last thing that I'm going to hit today. It's the reason, this is what spurred the thought for this show. And it was the Avengers. And it was, so I'm watching it with Yasmin and Adi. And it's Adi's first time like going through all the Marvel movies. And so we're watching it and we watched, you know, Thor, we watched Captain America, and we watched Iron Man. And then we watched Avengers. Realizing now as we watch Iron Man 2 that we were supposed to watch that before. It's been a long time. Judge me. Marvel nerds. I love you guys, but I don't got it like that. But there was a point when Special Agent Clausen from S.H.I.E.L.D., like kind of the balding guy who was like real charming in a passive kind of way, was killed by Loki, and Director Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, pulls out the playing cards that they've kind of been like plugging into the storyline of like he's got these like collector's cards for Captain America that he wanted Captain America to sign. And he finally met Captain America and he's like, oh, I'd love you to sign him. And Captain America was like, yeah, man, I'll sign him for sure. And then they get attacked and then he gets killed. And then he pulls out the cards and they're like covered in blood and he throws them on the table. He's like, Agent Clausen, blah, 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 blah. You know, he died. I guess he never got around to signing his cards. And he was like, his charming nature of his character was that like no matter, they were all fighting like at that point in the movie, they're all like, oh, I'm better than you, you're worth nothing. And so there was like this really strong division amongst the Avengers, and this death was the thing that could pull them together, but it needed to be done in a way that really drove it home, because there wasn't time with the impending battle of Earth, you know, afoot, that Director Fury, you know, throws him on the table and is like, you know, he died for you and blah, 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 blah. And where are you guys at, essentially? And that is the thing that spurs them together. And they let you know, one, that alone is a manipulation, right? Is playing on people's emotions to get them to act. That's manipulating. But think about the result of it. They went and saved the Earth. And I get it. It's a fictional story and it's fun, but it's just an example of how manipulation can be used in a way that's like, yeah, you know, you're consciously taking the action to change people's decisions and behaviors by impacting their emotions. And now the step above it is that one of the other agents came up and was like, those weren't in his jacket when he died. He's like, they were in his locker. And he was like, yeah, you're right, but they needed the push. Right. And so he's just straight up and like, yeah, I manipulated the crap out of them, but we need them right now. And so, you know, I'm just saying that like manipulation obviously absolutely can be used bad, just like anything. Any tool can be used for good or for bad. Manipulation is simply a tool. And when you acknowledge, when you see the presence of it and you acknowledge like, oh yeah, I'm totally being manipulated. Like if you feel yourself like emotionally being moved by something, oh, I'm being manipulated. Like, but is that for good or for bad? You know, like you can kind of get in, if we're doing the thing where we're making decisions emotionally and we're justifying it rationally post hoc, maybe we can add in some of that post hocness into while the emotions are taking place. That like once we understand the process, it's easier to be like, yeah, man, I really should get in shape. But like, do I need this program? Like, is this the right one? You know, and you can kind of understand it better. You can make better decisions for you, and it can really help you in your own personal, you know, endeavors moving forward to understand the difference between influence and manipulation. But that's really what I want to talk about today, guys. I really appreciate you, and just, you know, thank you so much for coming. I love, like I said, I love doing this, and the reason I come is to really help people to understand themselves better and to understand the world around them. Today was like the conversation about how we intermingle with the world around us, and so I think it's really important to understand how we do that. And this is a critical portion of it. So I hope that you guys found some value out of it. If so, you know, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I appreciate all of you. Keep coming back. And I cannot wait to get back with you guys again next week for another episode on the Matt Listowry Show.